what is our probably major item of the evening, and the one that I would imagine most of you are here for, and that is a public hearing on the Route 238 corridor land development parcel group 6, or otherwise known as the Carlos B. Quarry project. And we're being asked to adopt a resolution certifying an addendum to the 2014 General Plan Environmental Impact Report, approve the master development plan, and authorize the city manager to issue a request for proposals for the disposition and development of the parcel. And I think we're going to start this off with our city manager, Ms. McAdoo.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'm actually going to turn it over to our Deputy City Manager, Jennifer Ott, and our Community Services Manager, Monica Davis, who are leading this project. I'm very excited to bring this, which is probably one of the largest parcel groups of the former Caltrans properties, to the Council for next steps.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Jennifer Ott, Deputy City Manager. And as City Manager said, I'm here with Monica Davis, Community Services Manager, and also Joe Burke with the City Attorney's Office, and we've been working very closely together on this project. So first I'm going to start, okay, just use the, okay. Well, I'll stall while they're doing that. But we're here really to do 3 different items, and it's really to try, these are some of the major items that need really to set that community vision for Parcel Group 6. So as we move forward with the development, there's really clear understanding with the development community and the community at large about what the city wants to see on this property. So 3 items. First, certifying the general plan environmental impact report addendum, approval of a master development plan, and then approval of the issuance of a request for proposals. Quick background, and we've been over this before, but obviously a history of the 238 properties in Hayward ultimately not resulting in a freeway, and then the project being abandoned in 2009, and the city taking over in 2016 to really and entering into a purchase and sale agreement with Caltrans to take over the development of those parcels. And we really started the master development planning process in 2017. We have till 2022 to the end of the Caltrans agreement to essentially dispose or kind of sell these properties. These are 10 different parcels. We're here tonight to talk about the purple one in the middle, Parcel Group 6. And these different parcels, as the City Council and the community may know, are in different stages of the development process. But this one is really at the beginning of kind of engaging a private partner to help us develop Parcel 6. The goals, really been one of the reasons, why would the city step in and take over all this public land? Really, the parcels were being sold kind of individually by Caltrans, and by stepping in, the city is able to have more control over the development, have a cohesive and productive use of the property, and be able to further the community's visions and the city council's policies to really try to garner more public benefits for the community, and potentially fund new community benefits, eliminate neighborhood blight. So a lot of really great public reasons to take over this land and have more control over it. The site overview, this is just a picture of the quarry site. It's also called, it was a former quarry, so you also hear people refer to it as the quarry site. Large developable land area, very close proximity to CSU East Bay. It has potential for the Hayward Foothill Trail Loop. There's very broad planning envelopes. The City Council had already adopted a general plan and zoning for this property that really created a lot of flexibility and a broad envelope for development, view corridors. It does have steep slopes around the site. There's kind of lack of access and infrastructure, and then a PG&E easement. And then, as we'll talk a little further, also some riparian habitat that came up in some comments I know that the City Council received as well. Here's just a picture of the site, just shows kind of what the current Hayward Foothill Trail zoning is for the yellow, just so you can see what's on our zoning currently. Outreach and feedback, I'm going to go over quickly, but really we did do a pretty extensive outreach with the community over the last year. We held a community meeting November 15th where we specifically had a section just on Parcel Group 6. A lot of interest in student and faculty housing, affordable housing, new parks and open space. development that really tries to minimize traffic impacts and adopt alternative modes of transportation, a new community center, potential for a new school site, and the Bayview Village concept, which we'll talk about a little bit more. That's part of the Hayward Area Planning Association concept for this site. Concerns about traffic, parking impacts, too much focus on residential, and impacts of the trails and the creek setback and riparian areas. Then we also held a community meeting just on Parcel Group 6 for that neighborhood. There was a lot of support for the zoning and general plan designations, public transit options, dedicated bike lanes. So a lot of the same comments from a community meeting. Held a study session with the Planning Commission, so we didn't just go to the Planning Commission and ask them to kind of rubber stamp this. We went to them first, made sure we could address their comments up front before bringing the approval to them. Very supportive of the plan and making sure, again, to address these riparian and creek setbacks, and that the future Homeowners Association should provide neighborhood security and on-street parking enforcement to try to address some of those community feedback that we've heard. We also have worked very closely with Sherman Lewis and Hayward Area Planning Association and really trying to incorporate the Bayview Village concept and some of the underlying values that are in that concept. We see our plan as a much broader kind of approach to addressing those values, and that the Bayview Village concept being a kind of a way to implement that, a very specific way to implement that. But our master development plan creates a much broader kind of envelope and concept that would allow something like the Bayview Village concept to be proposed. It really, Sherman Lewis and HAPA had helped to establish the Sustainable Mixed-Use General Plan and Zoning designation for Parcel Group 6, so you'll see in our RFP we are committed, and the city, our recommendation is to stay committed to those existing general plan designations and zoning. And we've met almost monthly, if not more, with Sherman Lewis to really continue to work through this plan with him and HAPA. We also had a Council Economic Development Committee work session where really an emphasis on encouraging creative and innovative proposals, allowing potentially for more commercial use if desired by the development teams, requiring developers to exclude natural gas utilities, which is what we also we did for Parcel Group 5, encourage additional outreach, so don't just stop now, that you need to continue and make sure that private developers continue this commitment to engaging the public, and require additional engineering analysis regarding the new intersection on Carlos B to make sure we're ensuring a safe the Carlos B is maintained as a safe street, and then prohibit a gated community. The Planning Commission unanimously approved this concept and endorsed and recommended the council move forward with the master development plan. The one change that they have that's in there, we can strengthen a little bit, is already in the RFP, but to really make sure that we emphasize wildlife prevention requirements as part of the site plan. So we absolutely recommend adopting that suggestion. So the master development really is divided into 4 different parts, similar to the way that Parcel Group 5 was, where you talk about the public spaces, parks, trails, and open space. Then you move into the street circulation and transportation demand management, then more of the private development, the land use and development, and then ultimately the infrastructure. And that's how the master development plan is organized. So parks, trails, and open space, this is an illustrative based on the SD7 zoning that for the Foothill Trail zoning, and this shows also an illustrative cross-section. Just a rendering of what that could look like. And then I wanted to take a couple minutes here to, given some of the feedback that we heard from friends of San Lorenzo Creek, as well as some of the other community members, wanted to just talk a little bit about the trail and the creek setback comments. And so I just wanted to emphasize at this point we are at a conceptual stage. There will absolutely be much more detailed engineering, review, and approval that will occur as part of the site plan and the tentative map process. And that's really where the developer then hires the engineers. They really dig into the alignment of the trail. And we will include HARD, as well as all of our city staff and our engineering staff, to make sure that we're looking carefully at the alignment, and then making sure that we're mitigating any potential biological impacts to the trail construction. So I just want to emphasize at this stage, really those are lines on the plan, and it would have taken quite a bit more engineering and expense to figure out the exact alignment. And so we really prefer that the developer do that as part of their site plan and tentative map. That said, I think we have in the RFP touched on some of this already, but I think we can make it obviously clearer based on the comments, but we're recommending that we put something in the RFP that says any subsequent approvals, have the goal of a 20-foot setback from development, including the trail construction, and include creek restoration where possible as part of the trail development. These would be goals. We're not recommending strict requirements because we do think we need to see additional engineering. The site is constrained. It has steep slopes. We'd like the developer to have some flexibility working with the engineers, and there may, we're going to try to the extent possible to avoid working in that 20-foot setback area, but we want to maintain a little bit flexibility. If there are any intrusions into the riparian habitat, we have very strict local, regional, state, federal regulations about that. We'd most likely have to get a permit from the state or from the federal government, and there'd be additional regulations that would apply in the case that happened. But again, we're going to try to avoid it, but we would like a little bit of flexibility to provide to the developer. We also have attached as an amendment to the staff report a memo from our environmental review consultant confirming that the addendum adequately covers the trail development, and we provided this to the City Council. So we did ask them to double check everything, look at the comments, and confirm that the addendum is sufficient and that we are still consistent with the general plan EIR. Also, I just also want to make clear, because there actually were some comments from the neighborhood and the Highland neighborhood about that, if you see where the purple line is, that extension beyond the purple line, and their concerns about access to their neighborhood, how that would happen. There's actually quite a bit of topography there that the trail would have to overcome, possibly a bridge, which would be very expensive, and then concerns just about would it go into their backyards. And so we just want to make clear at this point, we are not recommending that the developer bridge that area and provide that direct access to Highland neighborhood. We think that will take more analysis and financial commitment, and we do know that HARD is working on a trail master plan, and so we're hoping that as the city moves forward with its plans, that there will also be efforts from HARD to create those additional connections and access. But I think it would require quite a bit of additional outreach and review to figure out how that connection will work, and expense, to be honest, with the bridge to get to that neighborhood. So we aren't recommending that developer build the trail beyond that purple line on the map up there. I just wanted to clarify that. Streets, circulation, and TDM, we need a new signalized intersection given the amount of development at Carlos B. It can't be an overlook because of the slope of the street and the visibility, so we'd have to move it up the street and use the PG&E easement that's there to create that signalized intersection. That will require additional engineering, so we would be working with Public Works again to confirm all of that works and that the street is safe. And then we really, unlike Parcel Group 5, given the density here that we're talking about and the proximity to CSU, East Bay, we do think this is a very good candidate for really testing some more aggressive and robust transportation strategies to try to get people out of their cars and into alternative modes of transportation. And we say that we really want to focus on a locally financed, so that means financed by taxes on the property, that not anyone else is outside of Parcel Group 6, but just Parcel Group 6 property owners, to help support a shuttle to BART and through CSU. And we've already had some preliminary conversations with AC Transit and Cal State about how this might work. There are some challenges given the steepness of Carlos B, but they both would like to team with the city on this, potentially have easy passes for AC Transit for all of the residents there, but it's still going to need some work. And we do present a shuttle route that we're proposing, or a transit service route that might work, but still some work to be done, but that this project would help finance transit service to BART. Bikeway facilities, we're also suggesting electric bike share, where we team with a company where you'd actually, so that students, if they live there, would be able to use electric bikes to get up the hill to CSU. This is something that is used in San Francisco, so we know it works on hills. It's a little outside the box, but we really think, given the student population there, trying to find alternative ways for the students to get to CSU and not have to drive. So we're trying to come up with other solutions to that. And then really trying to minimize, not minimize, but also have on-street parking requirements in accordance with the maximums already included in the SMU zoning. And so we're not suggesting changing any of those. This is just, and it shows the street section and just how some of the parking, on-street parking and streets might work. Land use and development. So this is what occurs from the private realm within Parcel Group 6. We are recommending student housing, that there be a minimum of 500 beds. If If those beds are in fourplexes or 4 units, then that would be about 125 units. And then multifamily housing and townhomes. And there's a minimum density of about 25 units per acre. So this is in the zoning currently. So it's a very dense project. And a maximum in the environmental review or the addendum is a 500 multifamily / townhomes, 500 student beds. And that's what's really proposed as a maximum on the development. Here's just some renderings of how that might look. And I think I didn't mention here, but we probably I should, is that there is a requirement also, or maybe it comes later, a minimum of a 1.5 acre neighborhood park. Infrastructure, all new infrastructure, and there's no existing utility, and that we are recommending that the developer use low impact development elements to really manage stormwater runoff, especially given the proximity to the creek, and there's best practices that would have to be adhered to make sure you didn't have runoff into the creek. Requests for proposals. So this is really, now that we adopt the master development plan, think of that as almost the regulatory side, the city wearing its regulatory hat. Now the RFP is really the city wearing the property owner hat and going out and asking the development community to respond, who's interested in potentially developing this consistent with the community's vision for this. So we would, if the approval is tonight to move forward with this, we'd issue the RFP on Thursday, solicit proposals from the development community, we'd run ads in the Business Times, send it out to a list of developers, a pretty long list of developers that we have relationships with. If necessary, we'd do a short list of developers, interview them, and then come back to the city council early next year with a recommendation with a preferred developer and enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with them so that we can move forward with an ultimate purchase agreement. There are some there are RFP development requirements. Some of this is required in the master development plan, but we kept the master development plan somewhat a little more flexible and broad, and then the RFP is a little more specific. And so really that they will need to construct the 16-foot wide multi-use trail throughout the proposed development. Developers, not only they'd have to meet the affordable housing requirements, but in this case we're actually requiring that they provide it on site. So whereas the city's affordable housing ordinance allow payment of fees or on site, we're requiring that they provide the affordable units on site. Green development, we've added things like no gas utilities, which isn't necessarily required in the city's codes, but we can do because this is a public land disposition in the city, saying this a condition of buying our land is that you cannot provide gas utilities here. Transportation demand management, we already talked about this, but this will be part of a robust TDM plan that would have to get approved as part of the development agreement with the city, so that way before the city council agrees to sell the land to them, you're going to know what they're proposing from a transportation standpoint. A Hayward resident priority preference plan. This was in the Parcel Group 5 as part of a referral from the council, is that we would grant a priority. We're asking developers to include a plan which would grant a priority preference for Hayward residents in the purchase or lease of market rate units. And this would obviously have to be done consistent with state and federal fair housing laws. And we are requiring in the RFP that they state any impact of this program on the purchase price. And then lastly, in this, there's the HAPA Bayview project understanding. Because we've been coordinating so closely with Sherman Lewis and then HAPA, we are asking that the developers take a look at the Bayview Village concept. We're not requiring that they adhere to it, and we're not, what we're saying is, hey, here's a more specific proposal on how the master development plan might be implemented. What do you think of it? And submit a 1 to 2 page understanding of the HAPA proposal and tell us what you think, your overall impressions, opportunities, constraints, financial feasibility of the Bayview Village concept, to give the City Council, HAPA, and the community some more information, market information from developers about the potential impacts of moving forward with a Bayview Village concept, and also soliciting potential interest in that concept. The RFP does not require anyone to build that, but it does require that they provide some information about their impressions on the Bayview Village concept. Next steps, ultimate entitlements would be a site plan review along with a tentative map, and then a final map after that. So you're looking at, that's 12 to 18 months of additional entitlements. And we can process these at the same time as the disposition and development agreements being negotiated, so we don't have to do one and then the other. Next steps, if this is approved tonight, we would move forward with the issuance of the RFP on Thursday, and then hopefully enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement next year, and then ultimately approval of the DDA, site plan, tentative map, TDM plan, all in fall of 2021. So we're recommending that you move forward with certifying the addendum to the general plan EIR and approve the master development plan and authorize issuance of the request for proposals. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jennifer, for your report. I was looking at the staff report, and I didn't see any mention, unless I missed it, of the Geologic Hazard Abatement District. Would this site be subject to that?
We'll look. We can add that, or we can take a look at that. We would review that as part of the regulatory process. I don't think that the fault has the same issues here as it does, for instance, parcel group 3. So I don't think it'll be necessary. But any public infrastructure, we can look at that as part of the public infrastructure. So we can make that clear that that has to be evaluated.
That analysis has to be conducted.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I had one question, but luckily I did find the answer, but just want to make it clear that in the staff report, it does explicitly say on page 9 that the request in this RFP is for the affordable housing to be met on site, to be built on site.
That is correct.
Initially, I couldn't find it in the RFP, and I just found it, and by chance, it happens to be on the same exact page 9 of the RFP. Okay. So that is spelled out and very clear.
Yes.
I have a question for City Attorney's Office. Could we, at this juncture, even though we did the Nexus study and everything with regard to updating the AHO ordinance, could we ask to exceed the current requirements, or do we legally have to comply with this number, the 10%?
As a property owner, you can require them to exceed that number.
Okay. Do we have to specify by what amount, or?
I think it is up to the council discretion, because this is going to be a negotiated development. I would just, again, caution that we are trying to balance generating money to pay for some other public benefits that the council has asked as the sort of goal of this project, and sort of balancing that. More affordable housing on site will likely mean lower potential purchase prices from developers.
Okay, and as it stands right now, it'd be 10% based off the number of units.
For the ownership, and then less, I think it's 6-7% for
the rental. Okay.
Yeah.
And then can you?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add that it is very. I mean, per unit, you're looking at $300,000 to $400,000 of subsidy for every affordable unit. So it is a very big impact on the financial bottom line to add more affordable housing.
Okay. And then can you speak a little bit? I wasn't clear on the student housing. This would be a privately owned, whether it's a townhome, apartment complex, whatever model comes into fruition, it would be owned privately, correct?
Correct, and I think we could more clearly specify that, but we have made it clear to CSU, for instance, that we're not looking to partner with them on this project, that we privately financed and privately owned, and that we will work with the city attorney's office to make sure that those restrictions are put on the land and put into the development agreement, so that it is maintained in private ownership and there's property tax that's collected on an ongoing basis.
Okay. And then my last question is, with a project like this, I've seen a lot of reference to bioretention and the bioswales. Has there been any kind of consultation with our local mosquito district in terms of just design and making sure that we're being cognitive of that? I haven't raised that in a long time, but I'm just curious if we've given any kind of consideration to.
No, we haven't. I mean,
can we send our plans to them?
Sure.
Once it comes back.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cermeño.
A good, thorough report. Thanks a lot. I only have one question. I couldn't find any reference to CWA on the staff report on requiring it on the RFP.
If that's something that the council wants to include, that can be discussed this evening, but at this point, it wasn't part of the original staff recommendation, bringing that forward to council at this point.
Okay. Yeah, we did discuss it last week, but okay, I guess we'll deal with it later. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I'm also very happy to see that student housing is being put as a priority on this particular land, considering it's so close to Cal State East Bay, and we have 3 colleges in the city. I just wanted to ask if you can elaborate a little bit more about what a purchase and sale agreement is, and if our city is giving funds up front to Caltrans.
Sure. Purchase and sale agreement, I think in this case, we would use what's called the Disposition Development Agreement, but it's very similar. It's essentially a contract. If you think of the exclusive negotiating agreement as kind of you get engaged, where you say, hey, we might like you, developer, and we want to talk more about the terms of how we might get married. The Disposition Development Agreement, the Purchase and Sale Agreement is the marriage contract, where you're saying we are committing to sell you the land if you meet certain conditions, and there are conditions in it. And the reason we might recommend doing a DDA instead of a Purchase and Sale Agreement is you kind of put more conditions on the actual development as opposed to just selling the land to them. And so that becomes the marriage contract. The city is then committed to selling the land to that developer, assuming they meet the obligations that are specified in that agreement upon the sale of the property. So that happens after the marriage. So you get married, and then you say, hey, the developer accomplishes certain things. And a lot of times they can show that they have sufficient financing, they have their construction contracts in place. Then you're agreeing to sell them the property, but that happens after the DDA. And then at that point, you get paid. The money comes into the bank.
So to be clear, have we paid Caltrans for this property?
No. And that's what I'm going to say is at that point, when you close on the property, the money comes to the city, and then we pay Caltrans the base price, or the price that they're allowed under the Purchase and Sale Agreement with Caltrans. But not until then do we pay Caltrans.
Okay. So a consignment type deal, if you will, right? And, I wanted to ask, so for about 29.5 acres, or roughly 30 acres, we have a potential range, it says a potential range of 738 to 628 units can be built, but the housing element assumed a more attainable capacity of 606 units. And the environmental analysis for this parcel group assumed a maximum of 625 units. Why is there such a difference between the three? And I also know that through some of the developers, they're saying that even this density is not potentially possible.
Yeah, so when you create the zoning, you create kind of a blanket. At that point, you're just creating kind of a very gross number. Say, hey, the density in this case can range from 25 units, and I forget the upper limit. It's in the plan, but and so you just set, it's kind of that first level framework. You can create this many units, and it's not intended to be very specific, because you want developers to have flexibility to come in and propose a plan, because at the time of the zoning, you haven't done all the engineering, the geotechnical analysis, you haven't looked at the site in this very detailed way, and it would be very expensive to do that at the time that you zone the property. So the zoning is very broad. Then what we did was kind of create this conceptual master development plan, which was making it a little more specific. We did have engineers, we did have planners look at this, do some site yield studies. I agree that I think that our numbers are probably aggressive in terms of the number of units that we can get, but we didn't want to artificially restrict the number of units either. So we wanted to create an envelope that allowed some flexibility, let the developers come in and do more engineering. They may not be able to fit that many units on the project, or depending on the product type, if they do denser, then maybe they can. And so we didn't want to artificially constrain them. And so that's why our numbers, but I do think based on the analysis we've done, the 500 units, townhomes, multifamily, the 500 beds, I think we're not leaving anything on the table, so to speak. I think it's going to be very hard to get more units than that on the land, given the constraints of the property.
And the staff report said 100 units of affordable housing on site, correct?
Well, I think if you assume 10%, that would be the maximum that would be on there. But it depends on whether or not it's rental or not.
And my question is in regards to the student housing, that does not contribute to the affordable housing ordinance number, correct?
Well, I think we are going to require that the student housing have, I think we're requiring that the student housing have a certain percent that would be restricted for affordable.
And what is the mechanism that we're going to ensure this?
We would have regulatory agreements that get placed on the property. And we do this for all on-site affordable housing. Our housing division manages those agreements, and they get attached to the DDA in forms, and then we record them on the property. So they become restrictions on the property that you have to maintain those units in perpetuity as affordable deed-restricted units. Okay. So we would do that on all the land that has on-site affordable housing on it.
And when we did community outreach, and I know you guys have spent quite some time on community outreach, this staff report specifically includes the HAPA recommendation. Why is that in particular singled out compared to any of our other projects with any other community organizations?
Well, we did we did community meetings, we've met with other organizations and stakeholders. I think in this particular case, there was a very vested history of HAPA being involved in the establishment of the zoning and the general plan designation, and just a very keen interest in seeing and a very specific concept for what would be developed here. And just like we did in Parcel Group 5, where we met with the neighbors that were very vocal and very interested and very vested in the outcome, we met with them several times. So it's just, from my perspective, when you're doing public land disposition, it's common to meet with stakeholders that show a very keen interest in the development and work with them to see if we can incorporate their, as many of their ideas as we can.
In your presentation, you also incorporated some of the concerns of the Friends of the San Lorenzo Creek regarding the trail as well as the 20-foot setback. And that, if I understand correctly, based on your presentation, you actually accept their recommendations, correct? As part of
we're going to put those as goals. And I can tell you we're going to try to achieve those. My recommendation isn't to 100% require it, because the site is challenged from a slope standpoint, and it's also, there's a lot of expenses related to the trail and infrastructure. I mean, our estimates right now are about $10 million of infrastructure for the project. So I think we would like a little flexibility to work with the developer, so that they may have to infringe on that 20-foot setback. And then at that point, we'll be able to evaluate the trade-offs of that. So, maybe it's 18 feet in one particular location because it's really tight. And then we would present that to you and make that really clear and disclose it and be transparent. But at this point, we're just talking in vague generalities, and it's hard to make those trade-offs. And so when we have more engineering analysis, we can look really specifically at what's being asked by the developer and then make a recommendation to you about whether or not to accept that.
Definitely. And the City of Hayward has a community workforce agreement with the Building Trades Council of Alameda County, correct?
Only for city capital projects.
So this particular project, it's not a requirement as of yet?
Correct, because this is technically the city selling this property to a private developer. Okay. Which is not covered under the community workforce agreement.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mendel.
Thank you. So, question about the park. You mentioned that there's a minimum 1.5 acre park. Is that 1.5 acre park, or could it be multiple small parks that add up to at least 1.5 acres? I
think we're open to I'm flexible.
So the RFP would be, you could have a valid response to the RFP that goes either way?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And then on the affordable housing, if we wanted to include more, that would be the kind of thing I would expect us to be discussing during the ENA process and not necessarily including tonight, right?
We could. I think the clearer, and this is something, the clearer we are now up front with developers about what the expectation is, the clearer the purchase price will be. So when we get a proposal back and we're not clear on the affordable housing, it is going to be very difficult for developers to give the city council a clear purchase price. It is affordable housing, we're very, obviously oversee the housing division, we're supportive of it, but it is very expensive.
Sure.
And it has a huge impact on the bottom line. So I think we would then get purchase prices that we really couldn't adequately evaluate if it were unclear as to what the affordable housing requirement is.
And then our affordable housing ordinance would require, let's say that there's 500 townhomes for sale and 125 four-bed student housing. So the inclusionary ordinance would require that 10% of the townhomes be sold as affordable ownership housing, and that 6% of the rental student housing be affordable. That would be the default, right? And then any variance from that would be something that could be negotiated as part of the affordable housing. There's a name for it. The agreement. We would negotiate as part of the ENA process if there were going to be a variance from that formula.
Yes, right. I think you have the ability as the landowner to do something different than what's in your affordable housing ordinance.
But absent doing something different, there will be some affordable units of every type that's included.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And
Thank
we
you.
can make that crystal clear if you'd like us to.
I mean, the ordinance is crystal clear about it. I don't think clarification in the RFP is needed. Just
And if I could just mention too, that the purchase price and the money that comes from the purchase price can also be used to support affordable housing. So that money is at the just full discretion of the city council, and you can use that to support affordable housing throughout the city. Like we use some of the proceeds from parcel 1 and 10 to operate the navigation center.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you. Although there's a priority, a council priority about unfunded liabilities, but yes, there is certainly discretion. You're right.
Good thing to remind us of.
So I just didn't want us to lose that. So I really wanted to appreciate the thoughtfulness on this issue and acknowledge that the public is here this evening and the diverse groups that participated. I have a question about, so going back to the affordability, a couple of weeks ago we had 4 projects all at the same time, and I talked about, and I think my colleagues, or a majority of my colleagues, supported the idea that we don't want just one price point, so that the townhome complex isn't all 800K units. There could be studios in there. There could be 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. That it's an affordable by design, which may help us get to some of that affordability with. There's the deed restricted affordables. That's the 10% requirement, and whether or not we do things with that. But I think from my vision, I'm wondering, did that come across? Is there anything we need to do to sort of strengthen or communicate that?
Yeah, I think if there's a desire to see a diversity of sizes of product type, it's probably good to say that. I would recommend that you put it as a goal, like the setbacks, just because there's a lot of costs in this project, and studio townhomes, for instance, those don't exist as a product type, so those would probably have to be condos, and that's a different potential construction type. I mean, so there could be impacts to the financial analysis and the bottom line, and so so we might want to make that a goal for the developer to, that you're looking for a mix of unit sizes to meet a diversity. So you might have it as a goal and then let them figure out how to do that. And then you can evaluate whether or not it's good enough or not. And ultimately, the decision is yours as to whether or not you enter into that marriage contract with them or not based on what they're proposing. But I think given all the things that we want to try to get out of this project, I'd be a little hesitant to over-require things at this stage of the process.
No, that's a fair point. I think the question in my mind, we'll do more decisions later, but the question I'm thinking about is, given that there's some opportunity for higher density here, would that then offset the opportunity, the higher expense for instance, a 3-story townhome could be a 4 or 5-story stacked flat option, same footprint. Does that get us where we need to go? So things I'm thinking about. The priority to the priority to live in Hayward, that thing, was there any discussion about that for employees in this? I'm not talking about city employees necessarily, certainly they're welcome, but for people who work in Hayward, as well as people who already live in Hayward.
No, that wasn't part of the referral that was there, but I think that's something, if you wanted to add, I think we could add that.
I'm wondering if it may be worth, I appreciated Councilmember Wahab's referral on that. And, one of the things we keep talking about is less cars. And so if part of, I'm wondering if there's a value to thinking about people who work in the city as a priority as well.
If I could just add, we might want to also, given that there's students that maybe they don't live, but they go to school also, just because since the student housing, to try to find someone who already lives in Hayward, I mean, you might want the benefit of trying to catch the commuters who are driving to CSU now. You might actually want them to be the ones to live in the student housing so they no longer have to drive. So you might want to consider including go to school in Hayward as well.
That's a really great point. They're enrolled in Yeah. Thank you for that. And then lastly, so there's a requirement to make a comment on Bayview, on the Bayview concept. If somebody wanted to build that concept, that they're not precluded from doing that in there.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, and I just, we have put out there a concept that includes both regular, market rate housing of perhaps different types, and then student housing, which you're envisioning as some kind of, one unit accommodating 4 students, so maybe 125 units of that type of housing. How do the affordable housing requirements and the parking requirements apply either the same or differently to the student housing as opposed to the regular housing?
I think it's a good question. I think the parking requirements would be the same. It's a good question, and I think I was going to say that based on the zoning, it's kind of the size of the units as a studio or 1 bedroom versus a 2+ bedroom. Those would be 4 bedrooms, but those are leased on. My understanding is that they're leased on a per bedroom basis. So it is a different product type, to be honest, and I think we would have to look at this a little more carefully because our ordinances don't really. It's a little different product type, so I think we'd have to study this a little bit further, but we would have parking requirements for the student housing, and then we would, but the leasing, I think, occurs a little differently. It's not on a per unit basis, it's on a per bedroom basis. So and
I'll comment on my thoughts about that later. I think, we obviously are wanting to minimize parking and car use, but the fact that it isn't really spelled out in the recommended request for proposals would leave the developer then some leeway in saying how they were going to actually provide that. For example, they could say a certain number, like 10% of the student housing will be for students of very low income or something that.
Right, we would require that. So if these are rental, they would be rental units, and we would require based on the direction. I think or at least that's what we're recommending is that you would require then the 6% of the units have to be deed restricted to students that are low income. But students and their incomes are different, right? So it is a different.
Right.
And to be honest, I've talked with our housing division manager. It is a little bit outside of the normal affordable housing. So you might just have to bear with us. We'd have to really dig into this a little bit, work with our housing division manager and figure out a way to do it. But the intent would be to try to deed restrict a certain percentage of the units to students that really don't have resources and are really struggling financially. And we would have to figure out a way to make sure that happened.
Yeah, that would be probably harder. But clearly, though, and I think we actually got a email comment about this earlier, that we're not going to say we're not going to allow the student housing to be counted as the affordable for the market rate housing.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilmember Salinas.
Yeah, I just had just one brief question. I know in the past I think it was the cannery development where when we approved those, there was sort of a goal, I guess, or a stated goal that it would be the fact that it was a transit-oriented development. Part of the selling point or part of the advertising of that development to potential home buyers were that it would be low cars or no cars or something. And so I was thinking, I'm sure whoever is going to be, going through this process, they'll be looking at this council meeting, hopefully, if they're smart. Can we include in here sort of another goal of, really coming up with, no vehicle, low vehicle, really making that part of the philosophy of this development of, we really want to reduce greenhouse gases and we really want to reduce use of cars. We want to promote public transportation or other modes of transportation.
Yeah, I think staff believes that we have included that. I think requiring a transportation demand management plan and have it, and we made it really clear we want a robust and aggressive one. Even, I mean, the idea of actually taking dollars from property owners and using that to subsidize transit service is not something very many jurisdictions are doing. So, and because usually jurisdictions do impact fees where they take the money and you build roads or you build facilities, but it's very rare that you have developments that are actually funding transportation services directly. And so we are suggesting you do that here. And so we do think we are, you know, it's certainly not to the same extent that the Hapa Bayview Village concept, where it's very, 100 parking spaces and no parking in the housing units. But we are trying to push the envelope from a TDM standpoint. And ultimately, obviously, the council decides if if the developer has done a sufficient job or not by looking at the TDM plan at the time we bring the development agreement to you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I don't see any other questions from council, so I'm going to open public comment for this item. I do have several cards here. The first is from Alan Fishman.
Good evening. I am a retired public school teacher. For over 25 years, I taught high school students about the environment and helped them engage in many local volunteer community projects, including restoration, even in downtown Hayward. In retirement, I am continuing my work with them as a volunteer. One of California's key science standards requires students to learn about the watershed and how to protect it. We need to practice what we preach and incorporate watershed restoration into every development project. We need to require this, not just try. So I heard that this evening, and we try to have the developers do this, but we should require the developers to do this and have habitat restoration to be part of any development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councilmember Wahab, did you have a question? No. Okay, and you're done too, Councilmember Salinas, right? Okay, a little confused here. Okay, Bruce King is our next speaker.
Can you project?
No.
Hi, I'm Bruce King with Friends of San Lorenzo Creek. On the site, on the northern side, we've got a USGS intermittent stream that's a tributary of Ward Creek system. The canyon there for that creek is about 100 feet deep. It's very lush, very steep canyon walls, and a very rich riparian environment. Unfortunately, the quarry removed about 150 feet of the hilltop, which probably had a north-facing slope on it, which would have been a riparian woodland. So what we have right now is a very flat piece of land that goes right up to a very pristine riparian area. So what we're really asked is that we establish a creek setback, which is a norm. The standard minimum is a 20-foot setback, and that we not put development in that setback, and we actually do some restoration to create a creek buffer and a wildlife corridor and a riparian corridor. So I appreciate what Jennifer did to assess the situation here. I am concerned about the exact words of goals versus try versus require, and I understand we're in a situation where we're not exactly sure what we're going to, what the feasibility is, but I am concerned we accomplish, some restoration of the creek setback, and we not put the trail in the middle of the setback. I am kind of perplexed that the project plan right now says that we're going to have a minimum 25-foot area, open space area between the development and the creek. And then we're going to now have a minimum creek setback of 20 feet, and somehow we're going to fit a 16-foot wide trail on there. So I'm not sure how that math quite adds up. And maybe Jennifer can elaborate on that when I'm done talking. And I guess I would also propose that in things like these site views, that if we're not going to include things like the trail going across the creek, that we call that a future trail. And if we're not going to have the developer put in the trail that goes upstream, that maybe we call that a future trail. And that way it's clear that that's not really part of this project, and we'll come back to it later. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to comment, Ms. Ott, about the question about the...
Sure. I mean, I'll start with the future trail. I agree. I think we could have been clearer about what's being proposed as part of this project versus a future trail, and so we'll try to do better about that. I think and we need to be clearer with the development community about that as well. So we will be clear in the RFP about that, and on future plans be a little clearer about that. I think we really what we did is we put the ST7 zone, the plan right on there because we don't know about the alignment, so we just put that on the site, and that's what's shown there. But I think we are not intending to have that trail go right through the middle of the creek. I mean, we will find ways to have it be closer to the development. That's what our project is. We're going to really try to stay outside of that, and we can also clean up any inconsistencies there are. We will strive to, based on the recommendation from Bruce, we can strive for the 20-foot setback. I can tell you, that's what I'm going to tell developers. You have to try to make this work. If you can't make it work, you have to show me the engineering of why you can't. I'm going to, so I can tell you from a staff perspective, our default is going to be preserve a 20-foot setback, and then you're going to have to really show us the details and have a pretty good justification for why you're not doing that. And then we would have to look at that engineering, and we would obviously be something we'd disclose to Bruce. We'd work with him on, and we'd come and with all that information. But at that point, we'd have engineering analysis, and we'd have a lot more detail about why we were struggling to meet that setback. And then we'll just clean up the inconsistencies and make it clear that it's the 20-foot setback that would be the goal of the project. So I apologize for that.
Okay. All right, thank you. The next card is from Alexander Alvarez.
Good evening, Councilman. My name is Alexander Alvarez. I'm a local Hayward resident and an apprentice for Sheet Metal Local 104. I'm here tonight to proudly speak in favor of Parcel 6 RFP having a community workforce agreement attached to it, ensuring the developers commit to using folks like myself from our local community to help build this and to create additional apprenticeship opportunities in the Sheet Metal Worker Union and every building trade union along with that. My career as a union sheet metal worker is helping me join the middle class and provide for my own family, and it's really done wonders for me. On this project with the Community Workforce Agreement, the fellow apprenticeship, and I will receive on-the-job training and work hours that will go towards my apprenticeship program and creating my background and eventually becoming a junior person along the way. Not all development in the East Bay are willing to make this commitment. And by the City of Hayward attaching this Community Workforce Agreement, you're expressing your support in the value of our local union apprenticeship program, area standard wages, construction worker protections. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tony Munoz is the next speaker.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Tony Munoz. I'm a field representative for the Carpenters Union, which is located right here in Hayward. And I am also a carpenter that has been able to call Hayward my home for the past 18 years. I was fortunate enough to join a carpenter's apprenticeship about 23 years ago. Time flies by. I've had the opportunity to work on projects all over the Bay Area, from malls in San Jose to the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, and I even had the opportunity to work at schools here in Hayward, where my daughters now attend. Been able to earn a livable wage and receive great benefits for myself and my family because of the career that I chose. I ask that you take a hard look at what unions do for the community every day in terms of providing career training opportunities for people like myself who are able to earn a family-sustaining wage. As of recent, there has been a lot of construction going on here in Hayward. Parcels have been sold off to developers for housing projects. Some have had no labor standards. These projects have not created any pathways to apprenticeship programs that would create a workforce for the future. I would ask that Parcel 6 require labor standards to a workforce community agreement so other people would have the same opportunity like the one that I had. Thank you much.
Thank you. Jeff Dixon.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. First, before I get started, all the members are here that are part of the building trades. Can you please stand up, please? So the few speakers you have spoke already have telling you about the impact to all our families. You guys can all sit down. The impact to all our families. These men and women have kids, grandkids. It's very important that we have standards put on projects where we can continue. Our hall is at 2525 Barrington Court, where we have over 350 apprentices. You know, we have the laborers hall that is here in Hayward. All the trades will benefit from a community workforce agreement. And we all know the cost of living here in the Bay Area. We all hear about gentrification and people can't afford to live in the areas. This type of attachment community workforce agreement will be paying area standard wages for the residents of Hayward to continue to live here and prosper. We have thousands of Hayward residents that are union members. We didn't want to come and bombard this place with 700, 800, or 900 members to speak on the behalf. But we're asking you to consider what we do for the community and what you do for the community and attach a workforce agreement so that all our members and our future members from Hayward High and all the different high schools in the Bay Area can prosper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Fernando Estrada.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, staff. My name is Fernando Estrada, and I'm the business manager of the Laborers Union here in Hayward. I'm here representing 3,315 laborers that call Hayward their home, with 15% of them being apprentices. I mean, I was looking at the plans and I was thinking of all the opportunities that our members can have and the building trades can have if this project was to be under a community workforce agreement. I mean, you have Hayward resident priority preference for the purchase. What about the construction workers? The community workforce agreement gives local folks the opportunity to work in their backyards on projects with such language. Projects without such language, I've seen folks from as far south as LA working right here in Hayward. So again, on behalf of the 3,315 laborers, that's only laborers, not counting the rest of the building trades that call Hayward their home, I ask you to add some kind of language that actually gives the construction workers that live in Hayward the opportunity to work within their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherman Lewis.
Good evening, members of the City Council, staff, and audience. I've been around a long time, longer, I think, than many of you here. I thought since 1978, we have played a role in fighting the freeway that made possible this property to be available for development instead of a highway. We also did a lot of work to protect open space up on the ridge. The 1 to 2 pages of comments from the developers, I hope, will not be limited to 2 pages. I was going to hope for 50 to 100 pages. I want to respond to some of the comments from council as far as the fault is concerned. We have had a preliminary geotechnical report, which is on the website. It is outside the Alquist-Priolo zone. It has a geomorphic break between Gabbro on the north and Knoxville Formation on the south. That will have to be trenched for a final geotechnical evaluation. We also have 100 affordables for sale at 110% of Alameda County median income of all of the units, from studios through 5-bedroom townhouses. That is possible for several reasons. We have greatly reduced right-of-way and reducing the cost of that. We have reduced lot costs because we get more lots on the same property. We use modular construction, integral roofs, 4-square construction, and as a result, we achieve a dramatic reduction in cost. The energy is purchased separately, and the parking is leased separately, all of which brings these prices below the 110% median requirement, which not only includes the housing cost through the mortgage, but also insurance and homeowner fees and taxes. As far as stormwater is concerned, we will have some bioswales, but the major recommendation from the engineering firm that wrote the engineer's report for this project, whom I talked with at some length about how this works, was very large pipes under the streets with small trickle-out pipes at the downhill end. And that does a job for retention of rainwater on the site. Now, Ms. Wahab, you had a question about why favor this Bayview project. It's a very good question. It is favored. And the reason is that back when this was being planned many years ago, I asked the city to consider the mixed-use zoning and general plan, and that was evaluated in the environmental impact report. Subsequent to that, the city council voted to support the Bayview concepts, and 4 out of the 7 people who voted on that are still here on council. So we feel that we've earned a chance to present a vision which is also, I think, shared by a lot of people. Obviously, we've done the most to articulate that vision, but it's widely shared to try to have a more sustainable, healthy lifestyle. As far as deed restrictions are concerned, we should restrict, because there's a risk that even though they're all affordable, that if the prices go up dramatically in the market, then those units are going to go up, and the only way to keep the price down is through some kind of restriction.
I think you are out of time.
Yeah, where's my time? I was looking for the red light. And
it expired, unfortunately.
So anyway, you can take a look at that sometime. It's only 32 pages, well, less than 40 pages anyway, and it has a lot of information about the whole project.
I was just so fascinated by what you were saying that, I was trying to figure out if I was one of those 4 people. But anyway, I would have probably given you a little extra time. You have put a whole lot of work into this project, and, it's good to see you down here, and
to make up for the lack of time, I'll send you more to read.
Okay, you do that. We'll look forward to that. All right, thank you. And finally, I have a card from Don Osborne. And that's the last card I have, so if anybody else does want to speak, please bring a card up to the city.
Good evening, Council. My name's Don Osborne, and I have very deep roots in the city of Hayward. My great-grandfather was Judge Jacob Harder, Jr. of Hayward. And the question about parking came up tonight, and it was a very difficult question, and I think I have a great idea for the parking. Okay, this is the second meeting I've been to today. I was at the Parks District headquarters, and one of the problems with the parks on the trail out in San Ramon is they are citing e-scooter riders. Now, if we were to put in this new project an electrical e-scooter charging area, that would alleviate a lot of parking and a lot of congestion on the streets going up to that college, because kids these days, They love these e-scooters. It's going towards the future. That's what we're thinking about, is the future. Less traffic, ease of congestion. These e-scooters are the way to go. Thank you.
All right. I'm not planning to try one anytime soon, but you make your point about young people, so. Okay, that was the last card I had from the public, so we will close public comment on this item, and, all right, Councilmember Wahab.
So I make the motion to move staff recommendation forward with the requirement to include a community workforce agreement to be negotiated with the Alameda County Building Trades Council on this particular parcel, as well as minimum affordable housing requirement on site consistent with our affordable housing ordinance, as well as a setback for the creek and wildlife and riparian corridor. I think with 30 acres of land, it is very possible, and it's not much of an ask.
Second.
Okay. And could you just once more go, what is the first item, staff recommendation plus?
To include a community.
How did you word the part about the building trades?
To include a community workforce agreement to be negotiated with the Alameda County Building Trades and Council for development on this parcel.
And
a minimum affordable housing requirement on site consistent with our affordable housing ordinance, and a setback for the creek and a wildlife and riparian corridor.
Just a setback. You didn't did you say 20 feet?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I
so
missed that. A setback of the 20 feet?
Yeah. Is that correct? You want to put that in there? Yes.
As a requirement, not as a goal?
Yes. Soft languages.
Okay. Okay. And that motion has been made by Councilmember Wahab and seconded by Councilmember Marquez. Did you want to speak to it, Councilmember Marquez? You seconded it?
No, I support the motion. I'm very eager to see the proposals come back. So just to be clear, this will come back to us. No final decisions being made tonight. This is just to get the information out to the developers.
Correct. And, I appreciate the council's interest in including the community workforce in the agreement. I just want to caution the council, and we've had many conversations about sort of the potential impact on the purchase price and balancing the council's multiple goals here, one of which is to fund the city's employees' unfunded pension liabilities and other post-retirement benefits. So I want to caution that we may come back and staff may have a recommendation not to accept any of the proposals received, and the council would have to consider that at that point, depending on what proposals we receive and kind of where we end up in terms of the purchase price on the project.
Okay. And I do just want to thank everyone for their input. Dr. Lewis, we get your emails frequently, so looking forward to getting another one. But thank you for all the public comments and really the community engagement. It's been very, very productive, so I just want to thank staff for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zermania.
One question: how tall would could this project be?
There's a maximum building height of 55 feet.
Which is 4 floors?
It's 5. It's 5 floors.
Okay, fine.
Depending on how tall the ground floor
is. It could
is.
stretch up to 6 floors just to increase density for whatever reason.
Well, also if there is, through the density bonus ordinance, if there's more affordable housing that's provided, then they could ask for a waiver of the building height. So there could be higher density. I will say, just talking to developers on some of the other work that we're doing in terms of incentivizing housing production, taller buildings cost a lot more because of requiring structured parking, the type of construction. So it's a very much more expensive product type.
True. But if we work on the shuttles going up and down the hill, that certainly could be something that could work.
Yes.
So we would have some affordable houses for sale, of course, right?
Correct.
Condos, and they would be affordable, and the others would be market rate, et cetera. If we were to include a goal of different size condominiums. And I'm thinking that the average price of a home in Hayward is $780,000. If we were to have condos which are smaller, let's say 1 or 1.5 bedrooms, they would not be selling for 800, close to 800,000. They could sell for 400, 450,000. I mean, millennials don't qualify for the 750, but they could qualify for the 450. My daughter being one, she could qualify for that, but she can't for 780. Thoughts?
I would just say that part of our goal with the RFP is to give developers the options and to give them the flexibility to propose what works. We, again, like I said, we're trying to balance a lot of public interest goals here.
True.
And so letting the developers have as much flexibility to propose different size units, what makes the most market feasibility for them, while also trying to meet the public benefit goals that the council has set forth for the project. So I think we need to be just careful about putting too many additional parameters around dictating what size units developers should build, and just let them sort of figure out what makes the most sense and try and put all the pieces together.
I'm hoping that somebody can think about that, affordable, large affordables, large market, and then smaller market, which would be 450, and the affordables. Okay, and I'll support the motion because it includes the requirement of the CWA. I think that's very important for our local workforce, for apprenticeship. It's good to tell our youngsters that they should shoot for becoming a doctor and an attorney and president of the United States. That's excellent. But we also have a need for carpenters and sheet metal workers and building trades council. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have a place to live. So I think that's important, and this is a good opportunity for them. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you. I have two requests to the maker in the second. One is, would you accept a friendly amendment to have a goal of diverse housing, of diverse price points? Not a requirement, but a goal. Is that...
Are you trying to adjust the affordable housing?
No, what I'm trying to get in there is affordable by design, but it's the idea that this is a place where density is high, where there's an opportunity, because otherwise we end up with all of the same units at all of the same price points.
So bedroom counts.
Right, thank you. Yeah, it's not deed restricted price points, it's smaller units, larger units.
So I think if the developer wants to provide something like that, they would, as our city manager has recommended, that it would be a very open option for them.
Right, but I'm saying if we don't articulate it as a goal, we're very likely to get just all of the same. We're likely to get a proposal that's all $800,000 units, and that's problematic for our community.
Goal versus requirement,
correct,
is very different. So you would prefer this as a goal,
correct,
which is fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just I wanted to ask about that because I think that's in here. Is that not in here where in the development agreement, I think it's page 7, I mean of the RFP, the proposed RFP, it says one of the development requirements is under planning requirements, diversity in residential product type.
So I don't disagree with that, but why I asked the question earlier was whether we say that often, and what we get is all of the same bedroom count, all of the same price point. And so my question earlier was about, do we need to articulate it? And that's what I heard back from staff, was it would be good to make it clear. And
so would you be recommending that this section here be beefed up a little too? Correct. Okay, so
yes, it wouldn't just be product type where you might say multifamily versus townhomes, but I think what Councilmember Lamnon's saying is that within each of those product types, like townhomes, for instance, you might have some smaller townhomes, you might have some bigger townhomes, so that the size of the units and how much they sell for might vary, and different people might be able to afford different types of units.
Exactly. And given the opportunity for a density bonus, given the amount of density, the height restriction, or the height opportunities on this, it's an opportunity to really play with this site. And I think I concur with the city manager's comments about trying to balance a lot of priorities here. That's absolutely true. and this is not an inexpensive site to build. It's also a lucrative site. And so I think if we're going to dream big, this is the site to do it on. So I appreciate the motion on that. And the other question for the maker in the second is, so it's a 10% affordable requirement for the ownership units. It's a 6% for the students, and I'm wondering if we want to just match that and have it be a
rental.
for the rental of the students.
Well,
the student housing is rental. It's a 6%.
Some more other housing might be rental too, right?
That's possible. I'm
Okay.
not sure it's market feasible, but it is possible.
And the student housing may well be owned
It's
and
unlikely.
then rented out. Yeah, okay.
So yes, it's 6% rental, it's 10% ownership, and my ask to the maker in the second is, what if we made it 10% across the board?
What if we made it 15% across the board?
I love the dream big thing. I just
Because let's be honest, our affordable housing ordinance is very low compared to a lot of other cities as well. So if you want, we could do it 15% for the homes and then 10% for rental.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
I will not support that at this juncture. You know, I'm a strong
Yeah.
proponent of affordable housing. I'm the only no vote on the Sohei project because it wasn't enough affordable housing. But there is an opportunity for us to earn money from this, which then we could put into other affordable projects. So I don't want to get into the weeds. Please, let's just keep it as is. Thank you. For the option 2, your first one, I will support amending in terms
So
of
10 and
more
10.
variety. No.
Okay.
She had 2 requests to amend.
Okay, and
so
you-
the
you
first
accept it?
request I support, the second one I do not.
Okay.
And I would just also, we can always put language in there to say, proposals will be looked favorably if they exceed the affordable housing requirement, and so that's.
And just to be very clear, the motion was a minimum of the affordable housing to be at our standard, but if they do provide, let's say, 20%, 30%, and we've been surprised by some developers as well, obviously we're going to be more interested in those particular pieces.
Well, hopefully any interested developer will watch this evening's hearing to hear what the council is looking for. That would be my suggestion if I was a developer wanting to bid on this project, but...
Jennifer's going to remind them, right?
That is in the RFP already.
Yes.
Include the link. I like your favorable language, though. I think we should add that.
Okay, so Councilmember Lemon's first suggestion about the diversity in housing types is accepted, but we are keeping the affordable as we had it, which is a minimum of the standards that we
But
have in
adding the
place.
favorable language, Mayor.
Okay. Now, I don't see any other council comments. And first of all, and maybe I should have done this at the very beginning, I want to disclose that I do live very close to this area, but it is outside. I live, farther than 500 feet, the circle we look at when we say we have to recuse ourselves from projects. And so I really thought carefully about this, but I truly believe that I am looking at this in the best interest of our city as a whole. This project does not really directly affect me and my house, where my house is. I don't see it doing that, either positively or negatively. And so, but I just did want to disclose that I probably live maybe within 1,000 feet, but not within 500 feet. And I have decided that I would like to participate. Basically, I was probably one of the, I'm sure I was, well, I've been on this council longer than anybody else here, so I'm sure I was one of those people who saw this from the very beginning, actually from the time that we first looked at rezoning the entire Caltrans, route there, when we learned that there would be no freeway, and I didn't live where I live now then, so I feel like I've seen this project through from a long, long time ago when it first became possible for us to even be considering these things, and so I'm happy to be participating in it. I do agree with the amendments we have made tonight. If we don't get adequate proposals back from the development community, I think we're going to have to seriously look at that and say, why is that and what can we do? I know there's been a lot of discussion about doing the community workforce agreement, and we have developers who are telling us it's just impossible, we won't be able to do it. I want to believe that that's not true. In the climate that we're living in right now, the times we're living in, where we are seeing incredible disparities in income between the people at the very top, and not just the people at the very bottom, but the people who used to be really the salt of the earth, the middle class people who I think I and many others up here, families, we're from those families that, went to work, belonged to unions, worked hard at maybe a physical job like construction, and earned good pay to bring up a family, and in many cases send your sons and daughters to for more education than the original worker was able to have him or herself. So we are living in that time. We have to give this a chance. I think it is a good thing to do. Our building trades play a huge role in our community, not just in terms of their actual work, what they build, but in terms of the apprenticeship programs that they sponsor, the young people they bring into the trades for future jobs. These are people we're going to need to build what we're going to need built, and we need a lot of stuff built right now in our community, and they should be sharing in earning decent incomes for doing that building. It's very hard work, and I am hopeful that we will get a good response from the development community. If we don't, we're really going to have to look at that. I would say to the building trade members who are here tonight that please go back to your unions and engage in dialogue with developers, and engage in ways that you can address some of the problems they have brought up. And I think there have been examples where there have been delays and there have been additional construction costs because not enough workers. We know right now there actually is a shortage of workers. So it's up to you too to make it work. But I think this council is willing to put it out there and give it a try and hope that it works. So with that, I will, I think somebody else wants to speak. Yes, Councilmember Salinas.
First of all, what I wanted to do is thank staff for their work on this. I know, these parcels, I feel that all eyes are on these 10 parcels, and all eyes are on you. They're on us too, but I think you are literally threading a needle through a lot of the interests throughout the community. So I appreciate your work on this. I also wanted to. I'm okay with the motion. I'm also very I like all of the goals that we've set, and now some of those goals have turned into requirements. I'm fine with those, and for those developers that are that will be watching this video as they sort of put this RFP together and put their proposal together, I should say. I think we've spoken very loud and clear, right? On-site affordable. And we really want to maximize as much as we can on this site, and on both sides, on the rental side and on the ownership side. I'm and of course I have to put a plug in for students with a focus on students, and I'm also looking at when students graduate. That this could be a potential first opportunity to enter the housing market in our city and begin a life in our city. And so, my general comments are I'm excited to see this go forward. I'm pleased that we will have a community workforce agreement. I think we're in, as what was stated, we're in some very interesting times today, and as creative as we can to support Hayward families, I think we should take advantage of those. So anyways, I think this is a good motion. I think this is a good proposal, and I look forward to voting yes for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I think we're ready to vote. And again, the motion was by Councilmember Wahab with a couple of additions, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. You think we're clear on the motion? Yes, Madam City Clerk. Okay. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. Thank you all. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your input. And do come back for phase 2 when we actually consider the development, hopefully someday soon, next year, 2020.